No pressure.
I don't feel any.
I don't think I'm over my skis by saying I believe we have a quorum. So let me call to order the November 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee. We are deeply indebted to our chair for joining us at this meeting. Yeah, deeply indebted. It's not that often we get him
The
to.
problem is we're deeply indebted.
We're not. Well said. Very funny. That's like a 1040 easy joke from an accountant. That's funny. Okay. All right, great. Well, welcome. David, any public speakers, please?
Yes, Chair, we have 3 speakers today. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also ask remind the public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there'll be a warning beep to remind you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Our first speaker will be Kara Girl, followed by Matthew Buckhees Highland.
Good afternoon. I'm Kara Girl, Planning and Advocacy Manager at the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. As the November financial plan comes out this week, we're relieved that riders no longer need to look in horror at red ink and fiscal cliffs that could have meant major service cuts or drastic fare hikes. Instead, the picture is looking better than it has in years. Thanks to the governor and state legislature, riders are enjoying service improvements on many subway lines and a much lower fare increase than we'd initially thought. It's great that the MTA won't have to continue the annual tradition of going to Albany to beg for funding. The MTA is an essential public service and should be treated as such. We're cautiously optimistic about many of the less consistent funding streams dedicated to the MTA in this year's budget, as the Citizens Budget Commission has shared. Casino revenue and more volatile taxes, to name a few, and look forward to seeing more of the MTA's operating efficiencies play out. Streamlining and improving MTA processes to save money and become more efficient will help riders and workers alike. We were also glad to see that across the board, fare box recovery ratios and fare box operating ratios are generally higher than forecasted, potentially because of some strong ridership days this year. Ensuring a strong return to ridership by giving riders a fast, reliable trip will help make sure that riders continue to choose transit for work, leisure, and everything in between. But the picture isn't all rosy. We need congestion pricing over the finish line, or we risk financial impacts across the transit system. Of course, congestion pricing funding is, and should be, lockboxed for critical capital investments that will help build and rebuild our system. But every lawsuit and delay creates risk to capital project funding, which in turn leads to an increase in debt and more pressure on the operating budget. Not to mention, putting off critical repair projects only increases their costs and stretch funding thinner when it does arrive. We can't afford to wait any longer for congestion pricing, and we can't let the operating budget get caught in the crosshairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker virtually is Matthew Buckhees Highland, who will be followed by Jason Anthony.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Chairman Zuckerman, Commissioners. I'm Matthew W. Buckhees Highland. I'm here to speak today about, the financial plan that CFO Willings will present today. Although I will miss Bob Ferrand's Southern accent when he presented his November plan, I look forward to seeing what's in it. Will they be fare hikes? Will they be maybe increasing the subway from $2.90 to $3? Will be increasing the fare, the tolls up by a few cents or whatever. I just have a question though, in relationship, to the sales tax, the 0.735%. Does that directly go to the Metropolitan Transportation Authority? I would appreciate if you give me an answer. Thank you. God bless you and have a great day.
Thank you. Our third and final speaker is Jason Anthony.
Hey Neil, hey Kevin. Newsflash. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey are going to do, once again, like they do every year, a fare and toll increase. This is due to, quote unquote, inflation, according to their CFO, Libby McCarthy, who doesn't want to collaborate with you, Kevin, over here on the east side of the Hudson. But we are doing you guys a favor. We are advocating very seriously with them to collaborate as one region, like we all should be as the tri-state area. Second of all, regarding the Omni rollout, I tested the Omni machine at Fordham Road on the concourse line. It works great, but we need to know if the accessibility reduced fare cards for Omni will be introduced. So I hope, Kevin, to hear and listen about your report, and we don't want no more fiscal cliff. And we should consider adding the gas tax to the MTA source of funding, because other jurisdictions do it, why not we? So with that, I'll yield the rest of my time. Happy holidays, and I'll see you in Capitol Construction.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public speaking portion of the agenda.
Thanks, David. Can I have a motion to approve our October minutes, please? Thank you. Second. Okay, additions, corrections, deletions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, abstentions, motion passes. There's no change to the work plan. We're going to get to the main event, which is the November financial plan that Kevin's going to walk us through. I'm not going to steal his thunder. I do want to say a couple things. One on process, so Kevin's going to present. I'll let Jano comment if he'd like to after that, and then we'll take comments and questions from ourselves as a board for Kevin and his team on that. So that's process. A couple things just to note. I did briefly look at it, and I will say, one, I am proud of the work that has been done. It's an extraordinary document. I think it's in keeping with what we've already expected, and I hope that at least this committee and maybe the wider board feels that we've been, and frankly the public, been transparent about where we're going, where we're coming from, and the like. The second is it's obviously the work of the staff, our CEO, the legislature, and ultimately the governor of New York with extraordinary leadership, because this is an extraordinary plan from where we are and where we've been in terms of the pandemic. And I'll finally say it has reasonable risks, like any plan. When Rob Mojica was on this board, he would talk to us as the head of the budget for the state. He'd say, a budget's a plan. It's not locked in stone, and that's true. It's a budget. We will see what happens. Life may change, but for where it is, I think the risks are reasonable. So hopefully you don't feel like I took too much from you, Kevin. The floor is yours. You're done. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Neil, and good afternoon. Generally speaking, this is going to be, a good news report, which is terrific. If you turn back the clock to where we were last November, it was a much different story. If you remember, we were talking about a $2.8 to $3 billion fiscal cliff. We were talking that we needed additional funding to avoid cutting service, layoffs, and high fare increases. And we were asking the board to approve a budget that was dependent on getting action out of Albany. So that's where we were a year. And as you know, as the year progressed, we made a ton of progress, led by the governor and the package that she got the legislature to approve that did give us new funding. So that's what this plan is based on. Again, the full details of the plan are going to go up on the website momentarily, and we're going to be asking for a vote on the 2024 budget on December 20th at the board meeting, so not the next board meeting, but the one after that. So we'll be available for any questions. So let's dig into it. So the summary, first of all, how's 2023 going? Year to date, we're modestly better than budget. Revenues are right on target, and expenses were running a little bit lower by approximately a couple $100 million. For the out years, 2024 to 27, revenue and expenses I'm going to show are basically in line with what we presented in July. So the good news, no surprises from what we presented in July. I do want to remind everybody that the financial plan in the out years assumes the biennial 4% fare and toll increase in 2025 and 2027 is needed to balance those budgets. The new state and city funding sources that were agreed to are generally coming in as expected, so no surprises, just getting going, but everything's on track. All the existing dedicated taxes and subsidies that we had previously continue to show some growth as the economy continues to do well. Note New York City employment for the first time reached the pre-pandemic level, so all good there. And importantly, and we have our presidents of the operating agencies here today. As you know, the big part of the budget, one big leg of the budget agreement was us coming to the table with operating savings where we promised $400 million starting in 2024, growing to $500 million in 25. The agencies have been working really hard, and we're happy to report today that in the budget is identified $427 million of savings above the $400 million target, and puts us that closer to hitting 500 in 2025. So we're ahead of schedule, ahead of target. But importantly, we're going to go through, or the presidents are going to go through, a detailed discussion of where those savings are coming from to, one, show the tremendous amount of work that went into identifying them, and two, the putting a reality into those savings. On the debt side, good news. We are paying off as promised, the $2.9 billion COVID-era deficit note. It's fully funded, sitting with the trustee to pay at maturity on December 15th. So when we come to ask you to approve the budget on December 20th, our debt load will be lighter by $2.9 billion, and we won't have to worry about paying debt service on that. So what is all this? What's the bottom line? We're going to go through it in more detail, but we're going to continue to be able to show balanced budgets through 2027. Andrew.
I'm sorry, but does this projection that you've just given and the good news assume a change in the level of fare evasion and action on it?
Or is
that part of
We're
this?
going to walk through that.
Can we,
Terrific.
I'd like,
Thank
just
you.
process-wise, I'd like to let him get through the whole thing, because we've got the agency. I know, but I don't want to, let's just let him get through it, then we'll just open the floor to ourselves, because I think there's a lot of puts and takes, obviously.
So just as a high level, you've seen these pies, but the proposed budget for 2024 is $19.3 billion. We've restrained the costs. It was the currently adopted budget is $19.2 billion, which we're going to come under, and this gives kind of our breakdown. Just a couple things to note. On the left-hand side, if you look at fare box revenue and toll revenue, that together they add up to 39% of our total resources. If you looked at that pie in pre-pandemic 2019, those two were 51%. This is the new normal that we're living in, that we have less fare and toll revenue as the overall mix to fund our operations. Here's where our dollars go. A couple things is labor. When you add the different pieces that are labor related, it's 61% of the overall budget. If you exclude debt service, it's actually 71% of kind of our daily operating cost. And debt service, you'll see at 15%. That used to be as high as 20% in some years. So we've been able to keep that low. This just quickly shows how things, in terms of our major categories, what's changed from July to November. Bottom line, very little change. Our forecasts were very accurate. We're going to talk a little bit about fare box and toll revenue lowering the estimate. Dedicated taxes are a little bit up. Operating expenses and debt service are a little bit better. They're actually better by the $427 million, but that was already built into the July plan. So So I want to step back a little bit just to remind everybody, just looking at some trend data, and I want to start with looking at our primary revenue sources. So on the left is our fare box and toll revenue growth since 2020, the low point during the pandemic. And so you'll see here, total fare and toll revenue has grown from 4.3 billion in 2020 to 7 billion projected for this year, and in our budget next year, 7.5 billion. That's been driven by both paid ridership recovery and the fare and toll increases that this board voted to help us start to get back to that 2019 level of 8.4 billion. On the importantly, on the state and local dedicated taxes and subsidies, they've continued to grow. We're projecting them at over 10 billion in the 2024 budget, higher than the pre-pandemic level, driven by both the growth in the economy and the additional revenue provided by the state and the city in the state budget agreement. Just for your if you remember what's that 10 billion comprise of? If you look at our top five, 3 billion comes from the new payroll mobility tax, including the new increase on the largest city employers. We're projecting about 1.7 billion from the corporate surcharge that comes to us through appropriation in the state, about 1.2 billion from the regional sales tax, which comes to us from appropriation from the state. Real estate related taxes are still $1 billion, so 10% of that, which, as you know, are volatile. And then petroleum business and motor fuel taxes of about 700 million, and then a lot of other items. Gives you a sense of it. So why are these state and local taxes and subsidies so important? Because they fund a large part of our operations, not only at transit, but also at the commuter rails. And so, again, when you look at it this way, for New York City Transit, bus and subway, the $9 billion of operating costs, $5.5 billion come from those taxes and subsidies. Long Island Railroad, we subsidize with $1.5 billion from state and local taxes, and Metro North, $1 billion. Now I want to turn and talk a little about fare box and toll revenue and paid ridership, particularly in respect to what we're using in the budget, which is still that midpoint, the McKinsey midpoint. And so the good news, when you just focus on overall transit and commuter fare box revenue, we're right on budget. You can see the line the last few months is right on that midpoint forecast. That's why we're continuing to be able to show the balanced budgets and keep to our revenue forecast. Bridges and tunnels, revenue and traffic has been really strong. We're well above the 2019 levels, and this doesn't even take into account the additional revenue we're getting from the base toll increases that we put in place. So the percentages are like 115% of 2019 when you build into account those toll increases. So good news on tolls. But as you heard in the transit, for those who were in transit committee and the presentation, the concern we're starting to see is how paid ridership has started to fall below our midpoint forecast. And so if you look, this is the combined transit and commuter, and if you look in the last 3 months, we've started to fall to the lower point of the forecast on ridership. Now, revenue has maintained the midpoint. That's because of tolls doing better. We're going to show the railroads doing better, and the yield or the ticket mix helping out revenues. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. And so this, if you look at transit, paid ridership, and you break out subways and buses, you see, dramatically different stories. You see subways Last couple months, just slightly below the midpoint on paid ridership, but not dramatic. But look on the right on transit, New York City Transit buses have basically fallen out of the forecast zone. And we're really actually headed in the other direction. Our forecast is for paid ridership to continue to increase, and it's actually started to decline. And that's and that completely matches what was discussed at Transit Committee in great detail. What does that mean for the financial plan? Well, one thing, and Andrew, to your question, what we've done, we kind of have two pictures, right? When we look at our overall fare box and toll revenue, we're right on plan. When we look under the covers, we start to see problems in the last couple months. So one thing we've done in the budget we're asking you to approve is we've taken the fare revenue and we've reduced it by $100 million for 2024 to account for that lower performance on paid bus ridership. Doesn't mean, and Rich can attest to that we're giving up on growing paid ridership. We still need to grow paid ridership, but we're just trying to be conservative in the budget we put in front of you for approval for next year, that we are accounting for what we're seeing in the near-term fare evasion. And then we're going to assess, as we get into mid-year, how are the fare evasion efforts working? How are the other areas that are outperforming? Are they continuing to outperform? And look at what that means for the out-year forecast. At the commuter railroads, paid ridership has continued to exceed the midpoint as we showed on the toll crossing. So irrespective of us, subsidizing, a large part of operations, the commuter railroads are on target on their paid ridership forecast. Now I want to turn to the expense side of the budget for a minute. So that's kind of what's going on the revenue side. I want to take a longer look at our expense side and so forth, and we try to take a longer look and say, is all the efforts and the identified savings, are we really having an impact on our overall expense budget? And so if you look at the left, this shows our expense budget in nominal dollars from 2019 through 2024. Through the proposed budget in 2024. And so although the budget is nominally grown, which is not unexpected given general wage increases and so forth, we've actually, the budget we have in front of you, the annual expense growth since 2019 is, on a compounded annual basis, is 3.1% below the rate of inflation over the same time period of 3.7%. So we've kept the growth in our expenses to below inflation. If you look at the right, what does that mean in terms of real spending? And so if you adjust all the numbers into 2019 dollars, we've actually, on a real spending basis, have reduced the budget from $16.6 billion to a inflation-adjusted $16.1 billion in the proposed budget in 2024. And that's even though we've added service, as Rich mentioned, and Kathy and Rob will attest, we're hitting record numbers on things like on-time performance. We've opened, new service on Long Island Railroad with Grand Central Madison. So even with all those additional efforts, we've still been able to, on a real dollar basis, reduce spending. So risks to the plan, as Neil pointed out, and there's some press coverage of a CBC report talking about how we have. Once you look at the risks, we have deficits. Basically the risks we've been identifying in every financial plan, and we're going to talk about here. the budget is based on a reasonable forecast taking into account those risks. But we have to keep looking at those risks and adjust as time goes on. So let's talk about what we see as, the primary risks. Number one that we talked about, continued paid ridership recovery. Through 2026, our plan assumes 10% growth in paid ridership across all the modes. What does that mean? We need more riders and we need lower fare evasion to achieve that. Just as a reminder, if we give up half of that growth because of continued higher fare evasion, that's a little over $300 million a year that we'll have to adjust our budgets for. The dedicated tax receipts, given it's $10 billion, it doesn't take much of a hit to the economy or the real estate market to have a big dollar impact. We've targeted that, or we've measured that at 250 to 750 million. All of the receipts are doing well. The real estate receipts are the ones that took the biggest hit. We already had brought those down, so they're at a very low level. We're assuming some recovery next year, but still below the 2019 level on the real estate related taxes. Casino revenues, as you know, that the first time we have them in our financial plan is 2026, 500 million. So the process to get those casinos licensed and cited, is important. We need to, have the state keep on track and the local entities that will be approving it to keep that on track for 2026. The MTA operating efficiencies, which we're going to talk to in great detail. Last time the risk was we need to identify them. The risk now is we've identified them, we're ahead of schedule. Now we just need to fully execute on them. And then, another assumption, and it was talked about a little bit, was that the capital program remain fully funded. And, what's the biggest risk to that right now is the New Jersey litigation delaying congestion pricing. So why am I talking about that? Well, because from an operating budget perspective, if congestion pricing is delayed, that means we need to we still have $6.6 billion of MTA bonds that are paid out of the operating budget that we would have to, rather than being able to hold off on, we would have to issue earlier, and that would increase debt service in the budget. We've already built in $2.2 billion that we're going to issue a little bit earlier that affects the back half of the budget, but that could continue to put pressure on our budget. So stepping back again, great news. Budgets are continuing to look balanced through 2027. Our 5 zeros remain intact. However, given the risks, we must remain cautious and vigilant. But generally speaking, our trajectory is great, and those dashed red bars, if you wonder what they are, those are those deficits that you were facing last year that were like $1.8 billion out in the out year, even after. Right. Maybe next time we'll get rid of the red dashes. And again, we're going to come back to you on December 20th for approval. At this point, we can either open up for questions or go right into the operating efficiency.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point to pause and see if there are questions on what Bob shared. It's Bob. Our earlier speaker was touting our previous CFO, whom I love, but I love you equally. Maybe even more so because you're right next to me. Anyway, maybe because he balanced the budget. Well said, Mr. Chair. All right, questions, comments for what was just said?
I'm going to jump in for just a moment. I just want to underscore, number one, we're talking about a balanced budget for 5 years, and every time we talk about it, we got to acknowledge the leadership of the governor in particular, who worked with the legislature and made this possible. So we're going to keep acknowledging that, because There will be other things that we need her help on and the legislature's help on, and it's important to say thank you because it is always due here. Number two is you're going to, the slide that I think has to be focused on is that the MTA, in a pretty complicated period, is running a ton more service, especially on the Long Island Railroad, but on transit as well, and it's 3% below its budget. Is in real terms is down by 3% over a 4 or 5 year period. So we've actually cut costs at the time we're adding service. That's where you want to be. That is sort of emblematic of good government. It's not just balancing the budget with new revenues. It's actually showing that you can do more with maybe a little bit less. So I'm proud of our team, Jay, as well as Kevin and everybody who works on this. And what a lot of what has made that possible is what you're going to hear about now, which is the efficiencies that the operating agencies have identified. This was not a matter of, sometimes you hear people talk about, we'll just cut the fat. This was a heavy duty exercise, so I'm going to let them describe it. But every week, I sat in on, and between those weekly meetings, there was a ton of work done to make sure that this was real. That when we put up $400 million as a goal, which Kevin raised to $500 million for the out years, once we started seeing how things were settling. And so there's a ton of work, of real first-class professional work that went into making it possible, and you're going to hear about that. And finally, at the risk of being, I told you so, I'm just going to remind us that, in the spring of 2022, I made a speech about fare evasion, and half the world kind of rolled their eyes at me. Honest, it's real. On the buses, we may be at the tipping point. And it's especially difficult because, we have no history of policing buses. This has largely been a system of voluntary compliance with, in the world that I grew up in, the bus driver was a serious authority figure. It doesn't seem like they get treated that way, although they should. But we have a problem, and we gotta face it. And so there's a little bit of, sometimes the discussion seems to get a little casual about this issue, and it is, if you believe, like I think everybody in this table does, that transit is essential and that it's, as I always say, like air and water, for New Yorkers, we need it to survive, that we cannot flinch from dealing with this. We have to. And it's going to be complicated because no one wants us to police, to create a policing environment in an area where we haven't historically, but we have to figure out how to deal with this because there are some serious consequences. But at the risk of being negative, because that is a huge threat to us. The final thing I would say is that I called the CBC. I just want to share with the board and said to them, if you disagree with Kevin's assessment of the risks, please say that. But because the risk valuation is baked into the budget. But please do not continue to put out these what to look for statements that act like every risk is going to, develop to maximum degree. It's misleading to the public and to people who watch the MTA's budget. And Andrew Ryan gave me his assurance that he would, try to do a little better job of saying, if you are disagreeing with our assessment of risk, please say that. But don't tell everybody that everything is going to go wrong if you don't really believe that's the responsible way to measure the risks. And so we just want to make sure that everybody understands, how to evaluate risk, and the way that this budget does is correct. So with that, I'm sorry to take up too much time, but I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Okay, thanks. Let's take advantage of what you suggested. Questions for Kevin on the budget presentation so far before we get to the detailed expense discussions. Andrew.
This is a legal question, and it's not being flip, but in one of your slides you mentioned if the New Jersey lawsuit delays congestion pricing or, God forbid, stops it in some way and causes us undue stress on the budget, is there any legal remedy to countersue for lost revenue or anything to that effect to make up for our loss?
Do you want to come?
I think I'm looking
Yeah.
over my shoulder at Paige. I honestly don't think that this is, it's probably not the right forum to discuss that. But I think that Kevin's just being transparent about the planning consequences of what New Jersey's chosen to do.
Next. Hada?
No, I just look forward to hearing from the agency presidents on the $427 million
Okay.
in savings.
Same? Everyone same? Okay. Well, the floor is back to Kevin to organize,
I'm going
orchestrate that.
to kick it off briefly and then turn it over to Rich, Kathy, and Rob. So let's just go in it. We committed to save $500 million in recurring operating costs, $100 million in 2023. For those who don't remember, that actually happened. $400 million in 24 and $500 million in 25 and thereafter. $427 million has been identified, so we're ahead of schedule. Again, they've really identified these through detailed analysis and benchmarking, which, when I arrived here in February of 2022, that work was already being done. John Kaufman from Strategic Initiatives was looking at it, and, ahead of, us promising it, there was a lot of groundwork that was done on it. So I'm just going to give the big picture, kind of the categories for the 2024 savings, where are they coming? And so on the left is by agency. You'll see 53% from subways, so subways and buses, which is transit, about 72%, and the balance coming out of from the railroads and bridges and tunnels. In terms of by spend type, you'll see spread out between base payroll, materials, and overtime are the three big drivers. Team will talk about that. And then by department, also distributed between maintenance of equipment, transportation, and maintenance of way. Again, the important element here, just to remind you, these savings are without reducing service, as a matter of fact, with increasing service, and without reducing reliability or not meeting all the goals of on-time performance and customer satisfaction. So it is having to do more with less. And so with that, I will turn the presentation and the clicker over to Rich.
Yeah, so this slide actually just sort of encapsulates what the three agencies have done. I think I drew the straw just to summarize, and we'll get into transit, and I'll pass it to Kathy and Rob. So recall that, well, first, the math, $100 million saved in 2023, that's been baked, and the target for the operating agency was $400 million, as Kevin mentioned. I think at a high level, and we'll get into the detail, I think, per agency, but we looked at areas of high spend growth. We examined productivity patterns, in our instance, looking at bus, for example, and looking at the various depots and whether or not there were productivity patterns we could identify. Using benchmarking, as Kevin mentioned, both with benchmarking we have against other agencies, within ourselves, frankly, in some of our procurement practices. We buy some of the same commodities, if you will, so looking at that as an example, probably more relevant for the two railroads, but it's not irrelevant for transit as well. And then, aligning our policies with industry standards. Are we over-inspecting or under-inspecting, for that matter, stuff, if you will? And then, maybe recall when we talked, I think maybe 5-6 months ago, it was really around technology and data, developing common standards, really sharpening our focus on cost drivers and investing in capital, sort of the four broad buckets of where we found these dollars. So, for transit, I like to say that 2024 is the year of 70 and 300. 70% customer satisfaction and $300 million in savings. So to double down on Kevin's point, we've really looked at places that do not erode or, in fact, continue to support our focus to improve customer satisfaction while at the same time delivering on savings. And so, this is something we've talked a lot about. I have a couple of detailed slides on employee availability, but this is perhaps the the capstone example of that point, which is if you can get more employees to work who are productive, you're producing a better product, and you're reducing overtime costs because of the vast majority of our folks are actually driving something. They're putting out service. Insourcing cleaning, I think folks know, certainly the Transit Committee during COVID, we put out a lot of contracts, which actually was more costly. We have completed that insourcing now. So for both our station cleaners and our end-of-line cleaners, we also have some more control over where we can deploy groups, for example, Mobile Wash and some of our HIT teams for effectiveness. We took a data approach on rail car overhaul cycles. So the history here is that New York City Transit over the last maybe decade, 2 decades, has vacillated between a 6-year overhaul cycle and a 7-year overhaul cycle, depending on the budget, but not really looking at the component failures and saying, what are we looking at from a cycling perspective? And so we did a very bottom-up approach on failures on key components that are addressed in overhaul cycles. And what we landed on is actually 6.5 years is the right place. So we're going to monitor this closely. So we will be extending overhaul cycles by 6 months, but we believe very strongly this is a prudent change to our cycling, and as you can see, saves money. Earlier in transit, Frank talked about expanding our automated bus lane enforcement. It's going to be great to move buses, but it's also going to bring some revenue to the bottom line. $22 million is we think actually a pretty conservative estimate given what we've seen in terms of in terms of what we've seen over the last few years when it comes to cars parked in bus lanes. But I think as folks know, we discussed this at Transit, we'll now be able to ticket double parked cars, and we'll be able to ticket cars parked in bus spots. So bus stops, excuse me. So that will be an important part, again, of not only improving how we're putting service out, but and reducing probably a little bit of cost in there, but revenue as well. Optimizing overtime utilization. So this is a suite of things, everything from actually enforcing some existing timekeeping rules that we haven't been, to looking at our geo structure and seeing where we can be piggybacking off of work that C&D is doing, and just being more efficient with our workforce getting track maintenance in particular done. And so we've had some pilots successful this year. We're rolling out into 2024. Increasing energy efficiency. I mean, you've all had an opportunity to visit our lovely facilities in New York City Transit, some that are, older than us collectively, I think. But in all seriousness, the Transit Tech Lab that was introduced with the Partnership of New York City now 5-6 years ago, they've actually brought us a couple of great partners. For example, looking at boiler monitoring, something we just haven't done, and we're changing out LED lighting as well. Workers' comp I'll talk about in a second. We have a more detail. Reevaluating procurement specs. Are we too rigorous in the specs that we put out? The answer is yes. And so we've been looking at Transit's specs to see other opportunities for us to reduce the vendor cost, which they can pass along to us. Station agent, we've already rolled that out. Certainly the delta there was to exchange for $1 an hour. Station agents are out of the booth, but it also gave us tremendous more flexibility to manage station agent overtime. And so we have a $6 million improvement there. And you've heard me also talk about predictive maintenance on bus. So predicting a failure before a bus actually fails. This has been incredibly successful on our after treatment systems. And so we're tripling this or quadrupling this. I think we're going out to 5,000 buses now, and then looking at bringing this not only to the after treatment system, but also our HVAC and our engines. So that actually might be understated. With a bunch of other initiatives, we come to $304 million. I would say this, we are not resting on these. I assume that this is not going to be exact. We'll have takes and we'll have puts. And so the team is continuing to look at other opportunities to save money into next year. And of course, this doesn't express what Kevin mentioned earlier, is if we can actually make some headway on fare evasion, there'd be upside as well. Let me talk a little bit about employee availability, because that is important. So we've talked about this chart before, but over the last 23 years, we have lost a significant productivity for our employees. In 2000, the average New York City Transit employee worked 215 days. By 2020, it was 188. Now, even if you take COVID, which on average was about 2 days in 2020, the productivity has clearly been dropping. However, the good news is that we've been putting things in place over the last 18 months to improve that, both carrots and sticks. We've been focused on things like employee safety, which we'll talk about in a moment, incentive programs to get people back to work, and in our TWU agreement, we actually negotiated a cost or a savings share. So if we achieve 201 days of productivity across New York City Transit, we'll be able to provide some of those dollars to a particular class of employees that are showing up to work. Right now, we're trending in 2023 to about 199 days. So we are seeing, again, an improvement given all the focus that we've undertaken. You can also see, by the way, that workers' compensation is largely the driver for this drop, right? So 2 days 20 years ago to 11 days. So it was a 9-day change. I mean, there's a little, obviously, some other changes in there as well, but that's been the most significant change, and we're making a bunch of adjustments there, which I'll talk about. So, in terms of getting people back to work, first is we have to focus on employee safety, right? And so that's something that we have been incredibly focused on, particularly for our frontline employees. And the 5 areas where we see this to be the biggest issues, it won't shock you: train operators, conductors, station agents, cleaners, and bus operators. They're also the majority of all our employees in New York City Transit, but they're the ones that are being exposed to these assaults. And so a number of things that we've taken: cops, camera, and care course, banning offenders from the transit system. We have, obviously, unarmed gate guards that are out there that are providing some safety and security for our employees as well. With Pat Warren's team, very focused on the quality of life issues with NYPD in the system. All of our employees get de-escalation training. Now, I should emphasize, that is not saying that our employees are escalating and they're causing this, but as you well know, the ability to actually de-escalate a situation if a customer or someone who's emotionally disturbed is sort of in your face, that's an important part of the tools we want to give them in their toolbox. And then again, working with Jeremy Fiegelson with the district attorney's offices and Pat, really focusing in on some of these cases where we have recidivists who are assaulting our employees, for example, or police for that matter, and following those cases pretty closely. And that's in subways. On bus, we've talked about the cockpit. I think we showed the board, or you had the ability to look at an example of a couple cockpits that we're testing right now. We have piloted this fare evasion prevention expansion with the Eagle teams now on local bus with the support of NYPD. That's in its early stages, but we hope to have some data soon to see, is that working? How is it working? We're getting lessons learned from bus operators, again, de-escalation training, and again, asking the DAs for folks who are recidivists or just seemingly unable to comport themselves in a respectful way in our system to otherwise be banned. Workers' compensation. Been a big issue for us to focus on, and so we've made some immediate changes and some longer-term changes to bring what we believe workers' comp back down to a more appropriate level. So mental trauma claims, for example, have been extraordinarily high. We are an outlier, by the way, in other transit systems. Just maybe taking a step back, unlike most other places, New York City Transit trues up a workers' comp dollar, right? So if workers' comp is provided at 60 or 65%, we make the employee whole by contract. And so that is it's a bit unusual, and it's something that, as I said, is sacrosanct in our contract, but certainly, a potential area for employees to potentially take advantage of it. Not all by any stretch, but something that we've looked at. 6 years ago, the authority won, or the transit system, New York City Transit won the right to use a doctor in the first 30 days of an employee's injury with a New York certified PPO. This is pretty standard for a state, government entity. It was never implemented for a variety of reasons. We have implemented it as of Monday of this week. And we believe not only is this going to reduce our costs, but it's actually going to provide better care for our employees, because this probably won't surprise you, but there are some folks out there who we don't think have been applying a real rigorous standard in terms of employee health, and maybe just pushing up some bills. this is important. And then working with David Farber, I don't know if David's here, but David Farber and the legal team are ultimately responsible for workers' comp, and we've been working with Paige and David to help staff up the caseloads. There is no doubt that one of the challenges from transformation was to really, I would say, gut this group and not be able to manage, again, positively with carrots and sticks, our employees' health. And then finally, interestingly enough, but there was a study done 10 years ago that said New York City Transit should outsource the management of third-party claims, and it would take 3 years. And I think at the time, I've been told at least that since it was going to take 3 years, it was too long. This would have been implemented in 2017, by the way. But we are moving forward with this, with John Kaufman's help and his team working again with workers' compensation to apply a more, I would say, robust standard on how we're getting claims attacked. And what do I mean? There's just a lot of process right now. Either it's because we don't have the right skill sets or we don't have enough people to actually be looking at managing these claims and getting employees back to work. So we've been breaking down that process from A to Z, and having a third-party administrator, we believe, will save us tens of millions of dollars as well. Should we keep going, or Chair, I defer to you. I'm happy.
Look,
to-
I think this is a great detail. I think we should keep going because I think seeing the comparison across them is useful. That was very helpful, Rich, and very creative, I thought. So I'm sure the creativity will continue. Well, let's go to Kathy next, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Are you okay?
I'm going
Okay,
now,
fine,
sir.
fine.
Going to throw us off.
Good.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Before I present on our initiatives, I'd like to highlight the tremendous collaboration between the railroads all through this process. As you will see and hear throughout our presentations, we are sharing best ideas, best practices, and participating in studies together. This is not only the case between the railroads, but the agency as a whole, as will be presented in a later slide. These reductions were identified by utilizing data, looking at historical trends, and performing thorough analysis to reduce costs and realize operational efficiencies, and as Kevin had mentioned, without compromising service. The first area I'd like to speak to is materials management. This specific effort will reduce material spend costs. Inventory management is being improved to ensure that material and equipment purchases are aligned with usage and systematic needs. To accomplish this, we have analyzed our reliability-centered maintenance program, looking at our historical usage, and reviewed quantity per assembly change-out percentages, which is also part of a Six Sigma project. The next area I'd like to speak to is rolling stock productivity initiatives. This particular effort will improve rolling stock fleet processes and optimize resources. In realizing these savings, we have implemented processes to streamline certain activities, such as inspection and maintenance cycles for both rolling stock and car shop support equipment, aligning component overhauls, reducing preparation times, and specific training for specialized work tasks. As an example, we have aligned the M7 air brake overhaul with the M7 10-year truck program. We are now able to more efficiently manage both the M7 air brake and truck overhaul programs. The equipment now comes in once for both programs at the same time. This maximizes shop space utilization and allows for work to be performed simultaneously. Inspection processes are being standardized across the M7 and diesel fleets, as well as optimizing staffing for inspections and maintenance by utilizing new shop space at Metro North's Harmon shop. And the last initiative I'll speak to is the maintenance of way and maintenance of equipment overtime. This effort focuses on reducing overtime, pure and simple. Both railroads are hiring key craft positions to reduce backfill overtime coverage. We have reviewed and revised shop and infrastructure maintenance schedules to reduce overtime usage for planned activities. Both railroads, specifically with the MW departments, are working towards advanced work order tracking and analytics to inform better real-time decisions on our overtime spend. We plan to roll out these business improvements and data analytics in 2024 forward for both railroads. I'll now turn it over to Kathy.
Thanks, Rob. I'll go through the remainder of the initiatives on this slide. So the next one is contracts. Essentially, this is just improved and enhanced management oversight of our operating contracts to ensure that we're actually obtaining the level of third-party services that we require. The next item is train scheduling. This essentially builds on our efforts to optimize our train schedules and our current resources. We're using new technology to be able to more efficiently schedule rail equipment and have onboard staffing match customer demand. We're using loadway data to essentially better allocate positions between revenue service and capital support. Next item is a Metro North item, just a better job at capitalizing our M&W work where appropriate. This allows us to assess the scope, criteria, and complexity of some of our long-term and our larger capital projects related to our state of good repair. This also provides opportunities to perform that work more efficiently. The next item is an ongoing pilot with respect to standardizing rolling stock work. It is a subset of some of the work that Rob already described. We're trying to develop better business operations with respect to the development of work standards to increase inspection throughput and reduced dwell time when inspections are taking place. We expect that this will extend across both railroads. It's beginning now at Metro North's Croton Harmon shop, and we'll hear a little bit more about this pilot later. The last item, the other efficiency adjustments, is essentially just a basket of various adjustments that make the operation more efficient, such as Rich already described, better energy efficiency projects, including more efficient lighting, development of various building heating initiatives. One of the other items in play at Metro North is the modification of our event protocols at Grand Central and some of our policies to make that venue more inviting to outside groups, to allow more use of space and generate additional revenue. We have some other internal budget adjustments and allocation of operation support staff. And then I'm going to kick it back to Rob to mention an efficiency project that's unique to Long Island.
In terms of other efficiency adjustments that the Long Island Railroad is implementing, a specific project is strategically positioning train crews and streamlining ticket lifts to improve fare collection. This will increase fare box revenue as part of these savings. With this particular initiative, we are assessing full life cycle management by looking at assets, materials, inventory, and procurement to reduce overall cost. I like to label this an all-hands-on-deck initiative. Currently, both railroads are assessing life cycle materials management to reduce costs. An average of 35% of our growing operating costs are due to increased vendor, supplier materials, and inventory costs for the railroads. This is not just a railroad risk. This is the same escalating cost that is being felt across all industries and across every agency of the MTA due to increasing material costs in our logistics supply chain and inflation. Both railroads are addressing these escalating costs directly. We are working and have already begun so in 2023 to assess the full life cycle material management spend to put new processes and standards in place to reduce overall material cost in 2024. This includes partnership with all agencies and MTA headquarters functions such as enterprise asset management, materials management, inventory management, and procurement. In partnership with our fellow MTA agencies of bridges and tunnels, subways, and buses, we plan to address and focus on process improvement, procedure standards, economies of scale, and shared resources to meet this challenge in order to minimize stock out, reduce inventory buildup, boost productivity and throughput. This full life cycle review will not only ensure we can meet, but hopefully exceed budgeted material management targets. All findings and best practices will be shared between the agencies as this work proceeds. I'll now turn it over back to Kathy.
Thank you. I have the next two slides. So I want to dig in a little bit more on the item related to utilizing advanced data analytics to reduce overall overtime. It's a joint initiative with both railroads. I mean, obviously, as we've discussed in multiple committee meetings, overtime management is a priority across the MTA, not just at the railroads. And advanced data analytics is one of the methods that we're using to identify and reduce OT. Both railroads, I'm happy to report, are on track to meet their OT reduction targets for not only 2023, but for 2024 as well. We've discussed at Railroad Committee that one of the huge areas of focus at both railroads is making sure that we're doing a better job at hiring in key craft titles and positions to be able to reduce the need to backfill positions on overtime. Some of those key titles are electricians, mechanics, machinists, carmen, gang linemen, signal maintainers, radio maintainers. So these are particular crafts of focus in terms of identifying opportunities to reduce opportunities to backfill on overtime. We're also looking at reviewing and revising shop and infrastructure maintenance schedules to reduce overtime usage associated with planned activities. So looking at MW specifically, we've leaned into advanced work order tracking and analytics to be able to inform better real-time decision-making on our OT spend. We're going to be rolling out these business improvements and data analytics across other departments in 2024 going forward at both railroads. If you look at MW specifically at Metro North, we are using advanced OT data analytics, looking at shift, management centers, et cetera, as well as a more efficient and accountable work order process. By doing this, we're utilizing analytical data to identify cost benefits, creating data definitions for the data that we're gathering, as well as identifying the need to identify additional data to provide a common interpretation of the information that we're seeing and to assist in reporting. We're expanding OT data that we're gathering to other departments, and we're expanding the OT data that we're gathering to be able to get a better visibility in terms of some of the availability issues that Rich has already touched upon. We're developing a plan to digitize work order management in the field. Looking at what we've accomplished already in 2023, we have already seen a 71% decrease in facilities management overtime for the first half of 2023, and an additional 33% decrease as we headed back into the late summer and into the fall. We plan to continue to apply these formulas and what we've learned from the use of these advanced analytics to other management centers across both railroads as 2024 proceeds. Whoops, I don't know. Am I doing this
Middle
one?
one.
Ah, there we go. Or not. No? Ah, perfect. Thank you. The next is standardization of the inspection processes and fleet workflows. This is another item on the chart. Again, a joint initiative that both railroads are participating in to standardize our inspection processes and fleet workflows. This is something that we've started across the M7 fleet. The M7s constitute 30% of the Metro North fleet and 65% of the Long Island fleet. So there really wasn't a better place to start to be able to reassess our standards and identify opportunities for efficiencies in terms of how we conduct our M7 inspections. There are FRA requirements with respect to the mandated 92-day inspections for our M7 fleet. That's where the current pilot is focusing. We're using the Lean Six Sigma principles to look at sequencing and timing of the work with the goal of reducing the overall time that cars actually spend in the shop. So the KPI will be reduced dwell time. The pilot involves an initial task-by-task review of the various items that are required in the FRA 92-day PI. The focus is not necessarily just on taking money out of the budget, but on better business operations. And we expect that this focus on work standards will optimize the work performed and increase inspection throughput, reducing overtime, and again, reducing energy consumption in addition to reducing dwell time. The scheduling portfolio management design is in development for these projects. As I said, it's already underway at Metro North's Harmon Shop. We expect to be rolling it out at Long Island in 2024 at Hillside. So Metro North will begin to see the efficiencies from this in 2024, and we expect that Long Island will begin to see those efficiencies in 2025 and beyond. And this concludes the railroad presentation.
Okay, anything else?
Let me just give a summary, and then we can open up to questions. First of all, I really want to thank Kathy, Rob, and Rich on this, and their teams, and John Kaufman and Strategic Initiatives, but really at the operating agency. This is not easy stuff, right? This is, this is not just, we just can't close businesses and close parts of the business or whatever. They're two big drivers they're hit with kind of, every week. It's how to lower costs and how to make the, increase service and make service better. And, it's dual efforts, and it's just really, my observation is it's really tough stuff to get done. There's just not free savings sitting around that can be scooped up. So thank you, for the effort. I hope this presentation shows they really took a deep dive on this. Really, everything from some things that are relatively big dollar amounts to a lot of, a lot of singles or even bunt singles to get the numbers to add up. But really important stuff. Working with strategic initiatives, we've also built a way to measure this on an ongoing basis. So one, it's important to not only have the initiatives and hit the ground running, but to be able to look on a real-time basis. And so we have dashboards created, and we're going to be able to look at the financial performance on every 2 weeks and on a monthly basis, look at key performance indicators, look for, it's not everything is easy to forecast exactly what it's going to generate, and there's going to be lots of challenges, whether it's floods or snowstorms or other things that make the the plans have to take detours. So, but we will have ways to measure, monitor, and then make adjustments on a real-time basis. We're not just going to put this in the drawer and come to the committee at the end of the year and say, well, it either worked or it didn't work. We're gonna keep adjusting. One important, is I think Midori, you mentioned headquarters, and we do have more savings to accrue, and we're going to look at headquarters. There's also a lot of parts of headquarters that need to perform well so the agencies can perform well, and that's IT. We need to be innovative in IT to be able to do things more efficiently. And so there's again that we want to reduce our IT costs, but we want to use technology to our benefit. Procurement's important in terms of a lot of the issues, to find ways to redo the way we're approaching the markets. HR, because there's so many of those critical vacancies that need to be filled, and there's a real focus not only just fill the vacancies, but where are the real break points that the agencies need these critical positions hired, and HR is focused on that. Obviously, safety and security driving how we're thinking about fare evasion and so forth is going to be critical, and legal as it relates to workers' comp and other things. So there's a lot of interplay. Doesn't mean headquarters is not going to we're not going to continue to take a good look and have headquarters contribute. We also want to make sure headquarters is part of the solution.
Okay, let's. I think it's a good moment to take a break and open up for questions from the board, if any. Wow. Oh, all right. Sammy, you fresh.
Fresh?
You're
No,
fresh.
I don't
You're
know if fresh is the word.
No eggs.
No eggs. No. I just wanted to. You said it to me. I didn't say it. I just wanted to express appreciation. It was a big part of this was when we were making the ask, and many of us pushed very hard. All of us collectively pushed very hard for the state, for the legislature, for the governor to come to the table. And part of that conversation was we had to do what we had to do. And now not only if the numbers are there, as to Kevin's point, we're going to have to continue to monitor these things on an ongoing basis. But we're projected to exceed what we promised we would deliver, and that's a really good indication. If I was I'm hoping the state legislature and the governor will take that and appreciate it. And I think just having seen the process, over the past year, seeing all the everyone work together, there are things on these lists that are, everything from complete overhauls of thinking to, very very precise calibrations, and the fact that this required a lot of work, and I think this is something that goes lost in the public, something that I've paid close attention to since I've been here, having come from other, governmental work environments, how closely everyone works as a team. Like, this agency is moving as an agency, right? There's a lot of different component parts. A lot of them are very different from one another, but this agency is moving as an agency from the staff and the top leadership and then this board, and I just, great job.
Great, thank you. Midori?
Chair, Kevin, everybody who's worked on the budget, really appreciate it. It's very impressive to see all those zeros, and I'll keep talking about the fact that we have zeros. So it goes to the tremendous amount of work that folks in this room, folks outside the room have done. I'm really appreciative of the detailed list of operational efficiencies. I think that's something that a few board members asked for in the summer, and so it's really great to see it. Would love to kind of see this again with the actuals. I say that not lightly, though. As a former CFO of a city agency, I know how hard it is to realize these savings. When I look at this list, I see not just technology, not just innovation things, but really business process improvements, right? And that's what we really need to focus on. And how do we, as much as we can as a board, uplift how important that is. That might sometimes be seen as not as sexy, reevaluating procurement specs, but that is so critical and so important. And I'm sure I'll have questions about the specifics here and there, but I really appreciate the presentation. And one thing on workers' comp, Rich, I know that you've been interested in it and focused on it, and I appreciate that. One of the things is about, you said immediately think about rigorous application of legal standards around mental trauma claims, and thinking about how mental health, I know as part of, I think the Capital Group, there was research and engagement with doctors and physicians to think about how mental health is impacting behaviors of our ridership. Also thinking about, mental health is stigmatized, and so how do we think about I know it's important for us to look at the legal standards as well, but I think, the CDC even put out a study today that the life expectancy is still lower than what it was pre-pandemic. Not to say that's direct correlation to the number of hours people are out in a time, but kind of just being sensitive to that too, because, these are really difficult jobs,
Sure.
right?
No, there's no doubt, and that's where we start with we need to make sure we're providing our employees with a safe place to work. I didn't discuss the employee facility, effort that we've been undertaking now, where some of the work that, Subway Family Day or the absenteeism or lack of absenteeism incentives that Frank has built, or the 201 day, we need to still finalize that with the TWU, but we also think there's a potential unlock there to reward part of that savings to employees. On the flip side, though, I would say, we're also doing a rigorous analysis of the network and the doctors that are used, and, there's a handful who are the majority of the claims, and there are some anomalies with how particular offices are diagnosing people, as an example, right? So, we're digging all that stuff, but the workers' comp line item, just to give you all a sense, is $250 million a year. It's 250-ish, 240, Jay-ish, yeah, million a year.
And how many people are on workers' comp at this point, at any point in time for MTA?
Right now, it's probably in the hundreds. I don't know the exact number of cases. 2,200, right? And look, that's a handful of days, a handful of weeks, and there are some folks who are out a year or two, and some of those are vicious assaults where there's significant bodily injury, and there are others it's a little unclear, right? So some 12-9s, but I was thinking of, just some employees that I've followed, since they've gotten, severely injured. 12-9s for sure, and there's opportunity, we think, as well to help employees find the right care early. I think we've also seen some evidence where they've not gotten good care, and helping them find the right care early can also. And we've also launched this Aware and Care program, which, just for folks to know, it's our management team is reaching out to employees to make sure they don't fall between the cracks, right? So, for example, there's I think a bus operator whose son was going through an addiction crisis and didn't understand the services that we could provide. And reaching out to her rather than having her call in sick or, take unpaid time, unpaid leave, able to provide her with the services. And as a result, folks in this Aware and Care program are coming back to work 2 days more than that, sir.
Other questions? We actually have a little bit of business still to make. Norman, please.
Yeah, I don't want to stall your business here. I have a couple cautionary angles on this, particularly regarding expanding inspection cycles. We've gone through this several times. Andrew will probably remember where we've lengthened out the inspection cycles over time. And those who have worked with me in management know I have a saying, you can't lie to the equipment. So one thing that happens is that you, over the long term, drive down the MDBF. Now, granted, we have some greater tools than we used to have for monitoring these things. I'll give you that much credit. And as well, the equipment is simply better. So there is a practical element here where I can see it's a inviting target for savings. However, what it will really do right now, both the railroads and increasingly on the transit authority too, you have great MDBF numbers above what people that build these things would have told you were going to get. Well, you expand these inspection cycles, one thing that's going to happen, I mean, whether it plays out in what you guys call puts and takes, costs and benefits, whatever, terms it is, whether it plays off, how much it plays out, whether it's positive or not, I don't know, and you don't know either. In the future, you may you probably will reconsider this particular aspect of it. But what you're really doing is you're monetizing MDBF. So if you got an MDBF of 180,000 miles now, and it comes back at 140,000 miles down the road, nobody's going to bitch about it because it's still a high number. However, you've lost a lot in terms of what you're doing. So, a lot of this stuff's been tried before. You put it in terms of Six Sigma, it sounds like it's a new thing, but it's not much different than the ISO 9000 standards you had in past circumstances. What you said, 500 mil, what was the savings? 500 per shift of annual per M7 inspections seemed like a lot of money. Again, that's good equipment. You got really good, well-working equipment, and it's a lot easier to keep a well-working piece of equipment working well than it is to go in. Now, you're also at the same time spreading out the overhaul cycles. So as an equipment guy, I see this as sort of problematic. You're kind of pushing on one side and pushing on the other. And I wish you good luck with it. I hope you get these savings. I hope we have, better for everybody's. But particularly on the inspection cycles, I do sort of question what you're doing. Using Croton as a pilot, I kind of understand. On the other hand, it's a brand new facility, and that you get productivity numbers there that are representative in the rest of the properties. It could go either way. It's never been one of our more productive shops. So I don't know how that's going to play out either. I question that in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Norman. Anyone else? Okay, I want to thank our presidents for coming in and giving us this presentation. It's very clear you did exactly what was asked. As Midori said, these are not easy to get. I think you're somewhere between the muscle and the bone from my professional experience. I don't hear a lot of fat, and those things, as Midori correctly said, require process improvement. That is not easy, so thank you. We do expect, as you're going to track it, you report back to us in a periodicity that makes sense. And with that, I'm just going to move on to other business if everyone's okay with that. All right, moving on. Olga, please, Finance Watch. And I'm going to ask everyone who speaks from now on to give the highlights from Hamlet, please, because we have the... Yes, I understand. I understand. Understood. So highlights, please.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to report another rating upgrade on transportation revenue bonds. If you recall, last month we reported Moody's and S&P taking rating upgrades and other positive rating actions with respect to transportation revenue bonds. And now, more recently, on October 25th, Fitch Rating upgraded its rating of transportation revenue bonds from A- to A flat, and they also upgraded outlook, revised outlook from negative to stable. This also led to the long-term enhanced ratings on transportation revenue variable rate bonds to be improved as well. The enhanced ratings take into the account the ratings of transportation revenue bonds credit itself, as well as the credit of enhancement banks that provide liquidity support for variable rate bonds. This is a short Finance Watch, so happy to take any
Perfect.
questions.
Thank you, Olga. Any questions on Finance Watch? Okay, thank you very much. David, I'm just going to take, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump across because you'll find that we have an information item. You've got your investment report in the book. I'm sure there are questions, but David can take those, or Olga can take those offline. We then have our committee charter that's going to be looked at the December Governance Committee meetings. If you have any questions on our charter, please share those for the Governance Committee meeting in December. And then Lizette, over to you for procurements, please.
There is one action this month for MTA headquarters for Finance Committee approval in the estimated amount of $12.8 million. And again, this action can be found in the November Finance Committee book on page 30. This is a request for approval for the award of an estimated quantity purchase contract for the as-needed supply and delivery of office supplies and copy paper to Staples Contract and Commercial LLC. The contract period will be 3 years with 2 12-month options, exercised at MTA's discretion. This will continue the already successful consolidation of the MTA's office supply requirements. It was issued to 8 firms. We received proposals from 2 companies, and Staples' best and final offer of $12.8 million is $1.5 million, or 11% less than the other submission. It represents a negotiated 5-year savings of $3.1 million, or 19% as compared to their initial submitted proposal. This award is based on offering the lowest cost with the best possible value to the MTA. And it includes the maximum annual escalation. I submit this procurement action for Finance Committee approval.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions?
I do. It's not just paper, Lizette, it's all office supplies, right?
All office supplies, including paper.
Including paper, okay.
I'm going to ask a question I think Lizette, that Jay can answer, which is, has our expenditure on office supplies stayed stable or gone down?
So it has gone down. In 2017, it was about $6 million. In 2022, it was $3 million.
Contract, which is 12.6, 12.8 million is a 5-year contract, 6-year contract?
It is a 3 years with 2 12-month options.
3 years, so 4.
3 base,
Okay, fine.
and then 2 extensions, so
So
5
5
year
years,
total.
right, that's what I thought.
4-year total.
We're going really fast. Relax. So we're doing great. Motion.
Motion.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Comments. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Lizette.
There are no information items for Metro North or Long Island Railroad or Transit. There's one information item on page 32 of the committee book for Bridges and Tunnels, which was approved by its respective committee, requesting the board approve an award to 3 competitively solicited personal services contract to Atkins PA PC, Gannett Fleming Engineers and Architects PC, and Henningsen, Durham, and Richardson Architect and Engineering PC for miscellaneous toll collection consultant support services on an as-needed basis. And there are no FEMTAC items this month.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Florio, real estate items, please.
Mr. Chairman, real estate has 6 action items for consideration and approval. There's one administrative action item, which is an MTA all-agency modification to the existing policy governing licensed transactions for non-revenue generating uses on MTA agency property. The following 3 transactional items are for MTA New York City Transit. The first is an acquisition of temporary and permanent easements from New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, in support of accessibility improvements at the Broadway Junction Station in Brooklyn. Second is a lease with Generation Next Realty for the relocation of the New York City Transit Atlantic Cable Shop to 2016 Pitkin Avenue in Brooklyn. The third is a license amendment with Winfield Street, 2nd Avenue, for a LLC for a retail unit at the 96th Street Station on the 2nd Avenue subway. The next transactional item is for Bridges and Tunnels. It's a license with the City of New York for the reconstruction and maintenance of the Vincent Albano Playground in Manhattan on 39th Street. And the final transaction, 31st Street. The final transaction item is for MTA Metro North Railroad, and it's the acquisition of 4 Fisher Lane to support the automotive fueling station project in North White Plains. There are in addition 2 information items.
Let's just do the action items, please. Okay, motion to approve the real estate items.
So moved.
Second. Comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. All in favor, aye. Thank you very much.
Going directly into the
Capital,
CPC
yeah.
meeting.